It's just before 7 in the evening, the kind of summer night where the air feels soft and the sky glows orange. Inside a small event hall in Virginia, a wedding is in full swing. Music plays, people laugh, and the bride, glowing in her white dress, looks like she's living a dream. The guests raise their glasses, cameras flash, and everything feels picture perfect. But at the edge of the courtyard, where the string lights don't quite reach, stood a man no one expected to see. His clothes are worn, his hair unkempt, and his shoes look like they've walked too many miles. Some guests notice him, some whisper, but most just turn their eyes away. To them, he's out of place. To the bride, he's a stranger she barely glances at. What no one knows is that this quiet figure won't stay in the shadows for long. Before the night ends, he will rise from his seat, step into the light, and walk straight toward the stage, stopping the wedding in a way no one could have imagined. The church bells had finished ringing, and the last of the guests hurried inside, their laughter echoing down the block. Just a few steps away from the main doors, a man stood with his hands tucked deep inside a faded jacket that had seen better days. His shoes were worn thin, the kind that barely kept the cold from creeping in, and his unshaven face carried lines that made him appear older than he really was. In truth, he was only 28, but years of scraping by, of missed meals and long nights without shelter, had weathered him into someone strangers mistook for a man much older. His eyes, though tired and shadowed, held a flicker of something familiar, something people would only notice if they looked closely. But most didn't. To them, he was just another beggar lingering too close to a day meant for beauty and celebration. Guests averted their eyes, not wanting to ruin their cheerful moods with the weight of his presence. He shifted his weight, clutching a small paper bag with both hands, as if protecting the only thing he owned. Every so often, his gaze drifted toward the entrance of the church, watching people file in. His lips moved faintly, almost whispering, though no one could hear what he was saying. Some dismissed him as someone desperate for food, others as someone lost in his own world. But the truth was far different, and the reason he stood there that afternoon was about to change the course of the wedding in a way no one could imagine. The night had reached the part every guest waited for, the couple's first dance. The music softened, and Rachel and Michael moved to the center of the room, her dress flowing as he guided her gently. Guests stood, some recording the moment on their phones, others whispering about how beautiful the two of them looked together. The air inside carried only joy, yet outside the double doors, Thomas rose slowly from where he had been sitting. He brushed off his worn jacket, adjusted the strap of his weathered bag, and with measured steps, walked toward the entrance. When the doors opened, the light shifted. Conversations paused for a moment as a tall figure entered. His clothes looked old but clean, his shoes worn thin from years of walking. His face, though tired, carried an intensity that made people glance twice. For a few seconds, no one moved. Some thought perhaps he was lost, others assumed he might be part of the staff, but as he continued forward, the uncertainty in the room grew heavier. His eyes weren't searching the crowd at random, they were locked on the bride. Rachel froze mid-step, her hand tightening slightly on Michael's shoulder. It wasn't fear as much as disbelief, like her mind was trying to place a memory that had been hidden away for years. The music kept playing, but the rhythm of the moment was broken. Guests exchanged looks, wondering if they should whisper or remain silent, their curiosity pulling them toward the stranger who had dared to interrupt such a perfect evening. Michael's chest tightened. He knew then that it wasn't just his imagination earlier. This man wasn't an accident of the night. He carried purpose in his walk, a reason that connected him to them. Michael turned slightly, shielding Rachel with his body, but Thomas didn't stop. Step after step, he moved closer, until the space between past and present was about to collapse in front of everyone. The music faded as if the band itself felt the weight of the silence. All eyes were fixed on the man in the doorway. Thomas stopped just short of the dance floor, his breath steady, his expression unshaken. For a moment, he looked around the room, taking in the chandeliers, the polished silverware, the rows of tables covered in flowers that cost more than most families spent in a month. His gaze returned to Rachel, and when he spoke, his voice carried not just across the room but into every ear, low and steady, like a man who had waited too long to be ignored. "Rachel," he said, One word, but it shattered the stillness. The bride's lips parted as though she had seen a ghost. The name wasn't a guess, it was recognition, direct and undeniable. Whispers moved through the guests like wind through leaves. Some glanced at Michael, others leaned in closer to their neighbors, trying to make sense of it. Michael stiffened, his arm instinctively drawing Rachel back. He wanted to demand who this man was, but Rachel's eyes gave him pause. They were wide, fixed on Thomas, filled with a mix of shock and something harder to place. Guilt, perhaps, or memories long buried. The groom's questions caught in his throat as Thomas stepped closer, ignoring the startled ushers moving uncertainly at the edges. "You don't remember me?" Thomas asked, though the tone wasn't bitter. It was certain, almost resigned, as if he already knew the answer. He set his bag down by his feet, hands open, showing he meant no harm. The guests leaned forward in their seats, some barely breathing, waiting to see what would unfold. Rachel finally whispered, "Thomas." Her voice cracked under the weight of the name. The sound drew a collective gasp from the room, a ripple of realization that this was not a stranger barging in. It was someone tied to her past, a piece of her story that no one at the wedding had expected. Michael's jaw clenched. His mind raced through questions. Who was this man? Why had Rachel never spoken of him, and why now, of all days? But before he could speak, Thomas continued, his voice unshaken. "I wasn't invited, I know. I wasn't supposed to be here. But I couldn't stay outside, watching the life you built without remembering where you came from, where we came from." The room, once filled with laughter and clinking glasses, was silent enough to hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Every guest, every waiter, every musician was frozen, their eyes bouncing between the bride in her shimmering gown and the man whose ragged clothes stood in sharp contrast to the glitter of the evening. And though no one yet understood the depth of his words, everyone knew the celebration had shifted into something far more unforgettable. Rachel's knees felt weak beneath the weight of Thomas's words. She clutched her bouquet tighter, the flowers trembling slightly in her hand. The guests sat in stunned silence, eyes darting from her face to his, waiting for her to say something that could explain why this man, dressed in rags, carrying the mark of the streets, stood in the middle of what was supposed to be the most perfect day of her life. Michael's grip on her hand tightened. His voice was low but sharp. "Rachel, what is going on? Who is he?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her throat felt dry, her heart racing faster with every second of silence that passed. Finally, she whispered, "Thomas is my brother." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Gasps echoed against the ballroom walls, and whispers broke out like scattered sparks. Michael froze, his face hardening as he tried to process what he had just heard. The best man shifted uneasily, and several of the bridesmaids turned to each other in disbelief. Thomas didn't flinch. His eyes never left Rachel's. "You left, Rachel. You left, and you never came back. You walked away from everything, from me, from the life we had. Do you even know what I've been through since then?" His voice was steady, not shouted, but the pain behind it carried louder than any raised tone. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked hard, refusing to let them fall in front of the hundreds of watching faces. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she tried to find her words. "I thought you were gone, Thomas," she said softly, her voice cracking. "After Mom and Dad passed, after the house was taken, I didn't know where you were. I searched, but you disappeared." Thomas shook his head slowly, his jaw tightening. "I didn't disappear. I was there. I was 16, Rachel. 16, trying to keep us together while you took the first chance to run. You had your scholarships, your new life, your doors opening. I had nothing. And when I looked around, you weren't there." Rachel's shoulders shook, her lips trembling as the reality of his words pierced through years of silence. The guests were transfixed, their fancy clothes and filled glasses forgotten. The bride and the beggar weren't strangers after all, they were family. Michael finally spoke, his voice low but edged with disbelief. "You never told me you had a brother." Rachel turned to him, her tears breaking free now. "I thought he was gone. I thought he was dead." The room went quiet again, every ear straining to hear what would come next. Thomas took a step closer, his hand tightening into a fist, then loosening as he struggled to hold back years of pain. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Rachel. I came because I needed you to see me. I needed you to remember where you came from. I needed to know if I still mattered to you." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, filled with the kind of truth that changes everything. Rachel lowered her gaze, the tears finally streaming down her cheeks. The fairy tale glow of her wedding was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of family, abandonment, and choices that never truly fade away. The ballroom was still. The only sound was the faint clink of a glass someone set down too quickly, the echoes stretching in the silence. Rachel's mascara streaked down her cheeks, her white dress a stark contrast to the shadow of her past standing before her. Thomas's chest rose and fell with measured breaths, as though he was daring her to look away again. Michael's hand slid from hers, his eyes searching her face for answers she wasn't ready to give. Rachel finally stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her bouquet dropping quietly onto the stage. She stood directly in front of Thomas now, only inches between them. Her voice was soft, but the room carried every word. "I never stopped thinking of you. I never stopped missing you. I thought I had lost you forever, and I didn't know how to carry that weight." Thomas's eyes glistened, though he blinked the tears back. "You had everything, and I had nothing." Rachel reached out slowly, her hand trembling, and placed it gently on his arm. "You had me. You always had me. I couldn't find you." A hush fell even deeper across the crowd. The image was surreal. The bride in her gown, the so-called beggar in his worn clothes, meeting at the very place she was supposed to begin a new life. Michael stepped closer, his face tight with emotion. "Rachel," he said firmly, "this is your wedding. But I need to know right now, what does this mean?" Rachel turned to him, tears still falling, and for a moment the entire future of her life seemed suspended in that breath. She looked at the man she had promised to marry, then back at the brother she thought she'd lost forever. Her voice shook but steadied as she spoke. "It means I can't pretend anymore. This is my family. This is my blood. And I will not walk away from him again." Gasps rippled through the room, but Rachel didn't flinch. She turned back to Thomas, holding his face in her hands now. "You matter. You've always mattered. And I swear, from this day forward, I will not let go of you again." Thomas's tears finally broke free, his hardened expression melting as years of pain cracked open under the weight of her words. He whispered, almost to himself, "I just wanted to hear that." Rachel pulled him into her arms, the embrace raw and real, a moment that no guest would ever forget. Michael stood frozen, his jaw tight, but slowly he nodded, stepping back toward the crowd, his silence speaking louder than words. The wedding was no longer just a union of two people, it had become the reunion of a family long divided. Guests wiped their eyes, some whispering prayers, others simply watching in awe. The music hadn't played, the officiant hadn't spoken, yet everyone knew they had witnessed something greater than a ceremony. They had witnessed redemption. As Rachel held her brother close, she whispered so quietly only he could hear, "You're home now. And I'm not letting you go again." The story of that day would be told for years, not because of the flowers, the food, or the dress, but because in a room filled with witnesses, a beggar revealed himself not as a stranger, but as the missing piece of a bride's heart. And in choosing to embrace him, Rachel discovered that sometimes the most important vows are not the ones spoken at the altar, but the ones whispered between family, promises that last a lifetime.